Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be going over what dealerships are doing to customers that are trying to buy out their lease. Before we get into the video though, I do want to mention if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get into this leasing shenanigans. So let's talk about what has been happening to people that are trying to buy out their leases within the last few months. So first off, we have to talk about what leasing is. Leasing is basically an extended rental on a car. You're essentially going to a dealership and you are having another company purchase that car for you, and then you're paying essentially rent payments on that car so that you can continue to drive that car. And with leases, at the end, you can choose to buy out the car if you want. You can choose to just give it to the leasing company at the end, or you can choose to sell it. If you sell it, you have to buy it and then sell it. So it's kind of like a two-part transaction, whereas if you just buy it or if you just give it to the leasing company, that's like a one-part transaction. But the best way to look at leasing is it's like an extended rental, and it's like rent to own if you do choose to buy it out. And so you might be wondering, what would you buy out this car for? It's called the residual value. So that's set at the beginning of the leasing contract. You basically say that you're going to pay a certain amount per month to the leasing company. And then at the end, you're going to owe a certain amount on the car if you do want to buy it out. And that's known as the residual value. And in the past, if someone wanted to buy out their lease, they would just pay the residual value plus taxes and any sort of state licensing and emission fees. And then they would just be off on their way. That is not what has been happening recently. So we've had a massive increase in used car values over the last year. It's like 40% year over year, which is crazy. And so leasing companies obviously see this, and less people have been leasing recently. And so between less people leasing and increased car values, leasing companies are trying to find ways to make money. And one of the ways they see that it can make money is by getting people to turn their leases in, because these set residual values, what the leasing company is buying these cars for, is significantly lower than what the market value is. And so they're trying to tack on fees that weren't talked about at the beginning of the lease, or they're just flat out saying that they don't want to help the person out with doing the lease buyout, and the person has to go and get help through a dealership to do the buyout. And the reason the leasing companies are pushing people to dealerships is if you go into a dealership and say, hey, I want to buy out my lease, you have to pay extra fees because a dealership doesn't want to process the paperwork for free. And so what the dealership is going to do is they're going to typically tack on some sort of just base dealership fee to cover different costs associated with the dealership. And then they might also try to certify your car if you go to a dealership which you pretty much have to with most of these leases. If you go to a dealership that sells that car brand new, and so then you have to pay an inspection fee on the car, and then on top of having to pay an inspection fee, you'll have to pay a certification fee. And then if there's anything that needs to be fixed on the car to basically get qualified for the certification, then you have to pay that. And next thing you know, you go in to buy out your lease and you're paying the residual value and several $1,000s more and taxes on top of that, just to have this transaction come to completion. And leasing companies are kind of counting on this. They're counting on you going to the dealership, there being a lot of extra fees tacked on, so then you're discouraged, and then you're like, you know what, I'm just going to give it back to the leasing company and play right into their hands. So here's what people have been doing to kind of fight back against this. So first off, in terms of the person to dealership interaction, the dealership doesn't have to certify cars to let you buy out the lease. They'll try to push that on you, but you don't have to take that ultimately. And so that gets rid of a lot of the fees. Now, the other dealership fees, that's something that's been pretty interesting. So some people have actually taken this to court and had legal battles over this, which is obviously a very expensive thing to do. But the thing at the end of that whole basically situation is that these people have come out where they can just buy out their lease for the residual value plus taxes and other state fees, not paying any dealership fees. And so it's kind of set this precedence where people can just go in and buy out their leases through the dealerships and not pay these fees. But the other thing is that ultimately you can work with the leasing company as well, whether they want to work with you or not. So that's something that people have also been pushing as kind of like a way to get around this. And this isn't like an easy, hey, I have this information, and so because I have this information, you're gonna have to do this for me. It's like you're gonna have to fight to get this done because these leasing companies and these dealerships really don't want to do things that way. They want to make money, right? And so it's definitely become a whole issue. And then the other problem with leasing companies is there's been a lot of companies over the last few years that have started to do leases that didn't do leases in the past, basically. And because there's all these new companies, they don't have all the proper licensing to be able to sell people their cars to them. So if you guys don't know, to be able to sell a car to someone, you have to have a dealer's license. And a lot of these leasing companies don't actually have dealer's licenses. All they do is leasing. They never sell these cars back to people because they expect people to just give them the car and then they go sell it at auction, which is a completely different system. But the point that I'm trying to make is because there's a lot of new leasing companies over the last few years that don't have dealer's licenses, they actually can't sell the car back to you, and that's another reason why they're pushing people to dealerships. Is again, there is that profit side of things, but then there's also the fact that they just can't, because a lot of states require you to have a dealer's license to sell cars to customers, and that's what a leasing company would be doing if they're selling you your lease at the residual value. So this whole situation is kind of a little bit of a mess. So to kind of come full circle, if you have a lease that is expiring, what you need to do, and I talk about this in the car buying guide, is you need to figure out what your residual value is. You need to figure out what state fees are, right? What's your state tax rate, and then emissions and licensing and all that stuff, because you haven't paid full tax on a lease. So you have to figure out what all those fees are. So then you know exactly how much you should pay when you go into a dealership, when you talk to a leasing company. So if they try to tack on these extra fees, then at least you have the information to fight back. You might get told no, but then you can just kind of go to another party. And again, like I said, it could potentially be a whole mess. But if you at least know that information, you at least know how much you should be paying. So then you have a baseline to kind of push back from. Hopefully this video helps you guys out. As always, if you're shopping for the first time, please subscribe. And again, link to the car buying guide in the description down below. I'll see you.